Welcome, one and all, to the Consistent AK podcast. My name is Luke, and I'm joined, as ever, by the very, very intelligent Nick Good. We're doing another in-depth episode. We're still covering the Schoonerverse films, so Kevin Smith films, for those who don't know what that is. And this episode is Chasing Amy. So join us, won't you all, for our next podcast episode. Okay, Nick, here we are, another in-depth Chasing Amy. Let's just dive on in. So it's Chasing Amy, eh? It's a bit different from the other Kevin Smith films, but should we do a little bit of background first?
Yeah.
So it was released in 1997, which is a fair chunk ago. I mean, we can say how old these films are as we go through, but we're just only going to feel older the more we talk about that. It was an actual success story compared to what we spoke about on the last in-depth, which was Mallrats, which bombed. It was made for $250,000, and it did a whopping $12 million at the box office.
Ooh.
And that is fairly good money back in the bank.
Yeah, that's good.
So a success story for Kevin Smith there, and sort of led the way into the next array of films that he did, because this was a success, and he wasn't very happy with how Mallrats went, and it was a bit of a sucker punch to him after the way Clerks went. So Chasing Amy, a bit different from what comes after, a bit different from what we've seen before with Clerks and Mallrats.
Yeah.
What do you think first of all? What do you think? What are your impressions of Chasing Amy? Has it changed over time since I guess you rewatched it pretty recently?
Yeah, like 10 days ago, something like
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember when I first saw it. Like, I can't remember the sequence of at what point I saw it, because I've sort of watched all the View Askew stuff out of sync. And I think the first time I saw it, I really enjoyed it. And it's probably like the most serious out of all the films. Like, it's got a pretty serious heart to it. And there's comedic beats in it, but there's also a lot of sadness. And it feels probably like the most raw. Like Clerks, whilst pretty raw in terms of filmmaking and the process and stuff, I feel like Chasing Amy, story-wise and emotion-wise, is like the rawest of his stuff. So yeah, I don't think it's kind of changed for me over time. I've always enjoyed it. But I think the older I get, the more I see the sadness in it, and the more it's not necessarily a happy ending.
No.
And it's really complex. I was talking to Charles about it last night, because he said he couldn't remember if he'd seen it or not. And I was sort of describing it. And it is a very complex film, because all the characters have sort of got some issue with them. And you sort of align to them at different periods throughout the story, where you sort of feel for them, and then you kind of think, oh, that's like, you need to unpack something, or you need to figure something out. And all the characters have that dynamic. I think everybody's kind of quite complicated, and there's not really a clear that person is correct. How about you?
I remember seeing it the first time. It was with my oldest brother, and I'm probably along the same lines as you. As in, when I first saw it, I just thought, that's just. I don't recall knowing much about like Kevin Smith. I think because I'm pretty sure I saw it quite early on. I'm pretty sure I saw it after Clerks the first time I saw it. So I hadn't seen Mallrats at this point. Hadn't seen Jay and Silent Bob or anything. I hadn't seen Dogma. I don't even know Jay and Silent Bob are out at this point. But I remember my brother told me to watch it, and I remember thinking, it's a bit of an odd film. Like, it's like you said, there's not really a winner.
Mhm.
No one's really that right either. Like they
Mm.
all have their sort of own ways of dealing with things, and I don't really agree with much of it.
Mhm.
Like in terms of like who is like they think they've got the answer, and it's actually a bit of a slap in the face to the other person.
Yeah.
But when I rewatched it probably a month ago, I've had a concussion in that time. No, 2 months ago, because it was before I had my concussion. Um, I didn't enjoy it as much. I don't
Okay.
know. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because I felt it was quite a. I, obviously, I've learned a lot since then. I've been to university and studied film and everything, so I don't know if that alters my perspective of it. But I just because it's what is it? It's like a romantic drama
Yeah.
with humor, right?
Yeah. It's not a
And I just
rom-com. It.
it's not a rom com. It's just it's too dark for that.
Yeah.
It's sort of like I admire it in a way when I've watched it recently because it leaves so much out on the table. And like you
Mm.
said, it's so raw. And it's not like typical rom com. They would all be like happy and like I know, Holden would find someone else or whatever would work out differently. But it's just so sad.
Yeah. It is. Yeah.
So and I think I know I obviously I'd seen it before, so I kind of know what I was getting into, but I just it just felt like almost too sad. Like not sad like tears rolling down my face, but just depressing, I guess, is the tone. And it's
Yeah.
so different. Like it's so odd that there isn't anything really before. Like you said, Clerks is raw in terms of like how it's made and everything like that. But Clerks to Clerks 2 is such a huge jump.
Mm.
Like there's humor, but it's like really like because of the setting and stuff of Clerks 2, and it's brighter and it's obviously got money behind it. Clerks 3 is a little bit like Clerks again, but there's some ridiculous stuff in there as well because they've got Randall and everything in there, who's just a ridiculous character. Not Randall. Wait, is it Randall? Who's the guy in Clerks 3? Who was it? What's his name? Who takes over at the end? He's all
Yeah, that
dressed up
is.
in his.
Isn't that
It's
Random?
Randall, isn't it?
Yeah.
Pillow pants and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Randall. Good. Yes, I'm on it. Right name.
Yeah.
But then after this, you got obviously you got Dogma, which is very has a lot of humor in it, a lot of stupidity, but it's got some pretty strong themes in it.
Yeah.
Jay, Silent Bob, and those sort of things. So this is just kind of feels out of place after seeing all of that. Like
Mhm.
you can't almost believe it's a Kevin Smith film, but
Yeah.
all the same players are there because you've seen Holden down the line and Ben Affleck and Jason Lee and everything. But yeah, I don't know, just didn't I didn't enjoy it as much.
Yeah.
And I don't know what I don't really know why. I don't know if it's because it was depressing because there's a lot of depressing films out there. I've seen many depressing films. Fuck me, I read a lot of depressing comics. Like
Mm.
we probably talked about that 3 years ago, whenever we started the podcast. Like a lot of, we talk about it when we read comics. It's like there's so much darkness and bleakness in these
Mhm.
comics that you read something that's a bit of a bounce all of a sudden. Like, oh, it was really fun.
Yeah.
I read this like high action packed wrestling comic the other day called Do a Powerbomb, which is
Nice.
fantastic. And I think, oh, it's wrestling, and it's like, oh, it looks like lucha libras and everything, fantastic. And then like 3 pages in, it's like, oh, my mum's dead.
Yeah.
Wow, that's nice, isn't it? So anyway, so yeah, I think I just found it a bit more darker in a way
Mm.
than I originally remembered, and I think it's because of what's come after that. I thought, okay, I'm not doesn't it's not sitting right with me. So
It is. Yeah. I think we podcasted like the evening I finished watching it, and it put me in a funk. Like it does leave you
I
in
think
kind
that's
of
it. Yeah, sorry,
yeah,
that's it. What you just said. It's like it puts you in a bit of funk, like a bit of downward.
yeah. Like I think it's really well made. Like the script's really good, performances are really good. Um, but where it leaves you and where it leaves those characters is very sad. Um, and because of such that, like the heavy conversations that take place in it, and the way the characters talk to each other, which I think feels very real. Like I think it's a very natural script. Like it doesn't feel forced. Like for me, that the script again feels very well crafted. But because of that, the conversations are just so heavy. And I think the mixture of having such heavy conversations and then that ending, it just really does kind of like leave you in a state of, oof, that was like good film making, but not enjoyable in the sense of it's you don't feel like there's a good resolution. It's just
No.
that's the resolution.
But do you think that's kind of like when you watched it again recently? Do you think it's because it is so kind of real, as in, I mean, I don't think there's many scenarios in the world. I'm sure there are actually plenty, but in most people's everyday life, they don't come across a situation where your best friend is in love with you, but you're in love with a lesbian who's lied to you about you being the first man that has like entered that forbidden chamber. Terrible analogy, but
Yeah.
whatever. Uh, and I think because I mean it's so harsh in terms of how relationships can go, right?
Mhm.
Like that's there is no happening. There are so the situation that this is based on is random, is what. But what I mean is that a lot of relationships don't work out, right? So in a
Yeah.
rom com, Reese Witherspoon would always probably end up with Ashton Kutcher,
Yeah.
and I recently watched a film with those two in, which was not good.
Oh no.
Um, but it was you know, you can watch it. Like my wife Yannicka, she's like, we'll watch this and then we'll watch this. I'm like, okay, and then we get to watch the thing that I want to watch first, and then Reese Witherspoon, something is going on. They're not even together in this film apart from the last 5 minutes. Nick, it doesn't make any sense. Anyway, so but in those kind of films, they always end up together, right? So in this terms,
Yeah.
if it's a romantic film, there is no happy ending. So it's like
Mm.
very like Kevin Smith has really thought like this, because I think it's based on something that happened to
Yeah.
him. Like
Yeah.
he's because that's why Silent Bob says that when he's talking to Holden in the cafe,
Yeah.
he's saying like, "Oh, you're chasing Amy because you're
Yeah.
chasing the one that you'll never get," basically. And
Yeah.
obviously, a lot of relationships do break down. Like most people here, most people around have had the heartbroken and stuff like that. So Holden has his heartbroken, and Max has his heartbroken, and
Mm.
she has her heartbroken as well, technically. And well, not technically, she does have heartbroken. So it's just very. I think it's because it's so real. That's why you're kind
Yeah.
of left thinking like, "Oh fuck, that's a bit too real life." Like
Yeah. Yeah. It is.
that
Yeah.
situation,
Yeah.
people get their hearts broken all the time. No one's a winner here. Like sometimes if you break up, then you know the male and the female, or the female and the female, or the male and the male, whatever. However, like no one comes out feeling good, right? If you're breaking up with
Mm.
someone, you feel like shit. If you're being broken up with, then you feel like shit. And the thing in this situation as well is that they all actually work in the same industry,
Yeah.
so it's like they're constantly going to see each other as well, and
Yeah.
obviously they do at the end, and it's still sad because especially when Banksy looks over at Holden at the end, and you know they do their it's like a moment, I can't remember what it's called, what they do,
Yeah.
something he symbolizes something to Holden across the room. It's too long ago, I've seen it now,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's like you feel bad for him because he obviously really liked Holden. They were best friends as well, you know.
Yeah.
So it's very sad.
Yeah. It is. It is just it's complicated. I think that's the thing, is that that's probably where it is really well written, is that like it all makes sense, and I think part of it makes so much sense because of how real it feels. um like, you know, in rom-coms, like even really good rom-coms, there's always a sense of sort of like otherworldliness that like that wouldn't happen in real life necessarily, you know, how drastic that is or whatever. um Whereas this feels more like that probably is what would happen, is that kind of no one would come out of it in the
Looking good.
best light,
Yeah,
and it would completely change their friendships and their relationship and stuff. But yeah, but the bits of
because it's
humor
not
that
because that's it's not funny, is it? Be a break like this situation
no,
isn't funny. There is no funny. I mean, it could have been the easiest thing in the world, it being a Kevin Smith film for
yeah,
like all the bads, you know, when they're in the room together and talking about the threesome and stuff and holding it slapped and everything. Like it would have been easy just
yeah,
to put like a good amount of comedy in after that to like
mhm,
lighten the mood, like you know,
yeah,
Jay outside dancing around or something. But
yeah,
it doesn't, and I think that's why it's quite serious and so depressing at the end. Or
mm,
I can't remember what you said a minute ago that hit home when you said it. It puts you in a funk
yeah, yeah.
because it is a romantic comedy film, but there isn't a lot of comedy in it, and
No,
it's Kevin Smith has like hit home that it's like yeah, a
pretty
bad
real.
situation all around.
Yeah, but the bits of humor in it, like they do really make me laugh. Like the opening bit, about Star Wars from
Yes.
the black comic creators great. I especially love the bit as well where Benki sort of says, "What about Lando?" And he's just like, "Fuck Lando." Um,
Yeah.
that kills me. And I like the
You're very abruptly. That's good.
yeah, and I like the conversation about Archie. The
Yeah.
the fact that they have such a long and deep conversation about a comic book and trying to understand it and what the subtext is and stuff like that. That's really good. And that sort of feels like an extension of Mallrats in an element.
Yes, it
Is
does. Like
that
when we're saying about on the wax with on the bench and everything, like
yeah,
right when they're having those it's not Ben Affleck, but it's Jason Lee and that guy who wasn't in anything else afterwards.
Jeremy London.
Can't remember his name. Jeremy London, that's the
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I like those bits as well. There are some quality bits in it. Like
Hmm.
it's good. I mean, I even like I actually think the diner scene with Kevin Smith and Jason
Yeah.
Hughes is really good. Like
Yeah.
that's a little bit different as well, isn't it? Because they come in
Yeah.
and they talk about the comic and everything, and then all of a sudden the tone shifts,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
which you don't get in more rats.
No.
You don't get it in Jay and Silent Bob. It's also weird as well, and I know we'll talk about Jay and Silent Bob, to see both Banksy and Holden further down the line, in Jay and Silent Bob and everything like that.
Throwback.
Especially when
Yeah.
it's Holden, when they walk in and they're like, "What the fuck's the internet?" Like
Yeah.
it's just that's such a weird thing to see them in that light after chasing Amy,
Yeah.
um, which is odd. So it's going to be odd to see them because I haven't watched Jay and Silent Bob yet and are rewatching spree of these films.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That is kind of the
beautiful.
beauty of these films, though, I think, is that you almost do see the characters in different ways. Um, like you see a different side of them as things progress. Um, but chasing Amy being the heaviest, I think, is always the one that like there is a bit of resolution way later on, like when you get to
Hmm.
reboot, um, which is a long time, like in between those two films. But it's just a chasing Amy, I think, is always the one that is very much the outlier of it. Really does dip you when you're watching these films because you sort of come off of more at silliness and the fun and the humor, hit this real heavy kind of thing, and then you're brought back up for Dogma. Um, it is really odd, but that's kind of the beauty of the View Askew universe kind of thing is that it allows such a breadth of like storytelling that you can just do that. Because like even Clerks 3 has its moments where it's really heavy, um, and it hits hard. But yeah, this is the one where it is probably the most apparent. And I guess those bits of humor probably stand out more. So like that opening Star Wars bit and the Archie conversation, I think stand out more to me just because there isn't a whole lot of more humor past that point.
No, yeah, it's
Um,
pretty downhill from there, isn't it?
yeah, like once you get past that, it is very much this intensity of them figuring out their relationship, and yeah, it just gets heavy. Like their conversation in the rain is the one that I always remember. That's always the one that sticks
Yeah,
with
that's
me.
that's what I remember as well. That's the bit I always come back to. That and Holden kissing Banksy and
Yeah,
Banksy's face, like holy shit, what is he
yeah,
doing?
yeah,
And also him saying that he was up for it as well, which is
yeah,
like, I don't know in that situation. Like, kind of, you would think it would probably be the other way around. I remember like thinking, like, you think maybe she would be up for it, but obviously she's already got what's her nickname? Finger cuffs, is it?
yeah,
She's already got that reputation and stuff like that. But I don't know, all the stuff Banksy's going on about it, that the fact that he's up for it because he really wants Holden
yeah,
is
totally.
yeah, like
Yeah,
also so I mean it is well written. Like there is
yeah,
all Kevin Smith films are well written with everything he throws in there. I also just thought it's quite like I think we said about this on the Mallrats episode that it just feels I don't know if it's the version I was watching, but it just feels so grey. Like the
yeah,
way it is, it's probably on purpose. I actually saw the poster and that's completely grey, that poster, other than
mhm,
the the Chasing Amy is like
yeah,
a
yeah,
dark
yeah,
red.
yeah,
So it's obviously meant to be shot like that, but again, like all the colors and stuff going on in Mallrats, and then the bam of Dogma, because Dogma's really bright and like
Yeah.
shiny. It just feels because Dogma is next, isn't it?
Yeah, Dogma is
It
the
is
next
Dogma.
one. It is.
Dogma's
Yeah,
next,
that's
yeah.
the. Yeah.
So I did. I know it's sidebar, but I did see Clerks 3 finally.
Nice. Good.
I did. You liked it, didn't you? Quite a lot.
I really did. Yeah, it was like there's. We'll obviously talk about it when we get to it, but there's like bits of the comedy which is doesn't work. There are bits that do, and then I really like the ending. Like I thought the ending was the you went for
The
it.
ending was the most. The ending was the most Clerks thing.
Yeah.
I, I think there. I mean, yeah, we'll talk about it, but I was a bit disappointed
Okay. Yeah.
in it. I don't know because I don't know what I yeah we'll talk about it, but I don't think it knew which one it was trying to be. Was it trying to be Clerks or Clerks 2 or kind of like a hybrid, I guess? But it just I don't know. I don't know. But anyway,
Yeah.
we'll get back
Yeah.
to
We'll
that.
get there. We'll get there. But
What
yeah.
did you think? Chasing Amy, I thought with all the performances by Ben Affleck and Jason Lee and Joey Adams is her name, isn't it? Joey
No.
Adams? No,
No.
Joey Lauren Adams, who
No.
I didn't know was dating Kevin Smith during this filming.
Yeah, it was either before like, when he was writing the script, and then they'd split up by the time the filming started. Is that it, or is it
I don't.
always?
I didn't even know they were dating. I just
Yeah,
when I was
just
reading things the other day in that big book of Kevin Smith I
nice. Yeah,
had.
I remember him saying somewhere or reading somewhere that he'd written it for her, like that the character was very much written for her, which is great. And again, I think that really lends to her performance that um, she's again very raw in it. Like she's the stuff that she talks about is always just very like, oh my god, that's so
Yeah,
intense. And it is also very different from Ben Affleck. Um,
it is.
like at that
It's
point,
different from that,
because
I think.
it going from his character in Mallrats, which is an absolute sleaze, to then this character which is quite nuanced and yeah. But then it's nice. I think later on again when you get to reboot and you have the sort of chasing Amy moment in reboot, that that works really well. I think
Yeah, I
kind of
think so as
ties it
well.
together. Um, yeah.
She hasn't done much after like these sort of films either, has she? The
No, she's not.
actress,
I don't think she's in
Adams.
Dogma. Um,
She's in both the Jane and Silent Bob films, isn't she? Or no, she's not in Strike Back, is she?
I don't.
Actually,
No, she's not in Strike Back.
no.
Um, and I think yeah, she's in Reboot. Um, but yeah, I can't remember if she's in any of the other ones after this, besides
No,
Reboot, because
I
she's not
just
in
remember
Clerks
she was
2.
in Big. I remember she was in Big Daddy. That
Yeah,
was like one of the
that
other
must have
things.
been
I'm just looking now.
that must have been around the same time as well. Like, got to be give or take a couple of years.
No, she's not in. No, she isn't in Jane and Silent Bob. I'm using a backup Mac, which is my sister-in-law Mac. You can literally just use Safari barely, so it's much
Nice,
else doesn't work.
always handy.
Um, yeah, I like the soundtrack as well. Pretty nice.
Yeah, very 90s. Like,
Very 90s. Yeah,
yeah,
good
I thought
stuff.
that about the whole thing actually. Watching it back, in the same way that like Friends sort of isn't a capsule of the 90s. This feels kind of similar, where it's like if you want to see what a 90s bar or 90s pub was like in the US, this is a pretty good version of it. Like
Yeah.
you sort of get that sense of it being kind of filled with smoke and claustrophobic and a lot of people. Um, yeah, it's just
What
yeah,
what what do you make of like the theme and stuff? Because obviously that's probably what it's best known for, isn't it? Like it's sexuality and it's like themes that run through it. Like any thoughts?
I think it's a real hard one. Again, this is kind of what Charles and I were talking about like, last night. Is that it is a very complicated film, and it's great that something like this existed in the 90s. Um, kind of starting that conversation around sexuality and what it kind of does in the mainstream and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. It's a hard one to kind of like look at in kind of modern day culture, because I feel like the idea of a threesome in modern day culture probably isn't the most wild thing out there.
No, not with everything that's out there either. Like
Yeah.
certain TV shows and films and everything. But then, like what
Then,
was it,
yeah.
96, was it, did we say?
Yeah,
Or 97?
yeah, 96, 97. And that's the interesting thing, is that you kind of realize like how much that's changed. But nowadays you kind of get to that bit and you're a bit like, oh, that's not that big.
What's the
Or
big
like
deal?
or the fact that she'd slept with other men before him.
Other men.
Like that doesn't seem to be as much of an issue these days either. It's interesting.
No, I think that when you watch it back now, I think the biggest thing from it that is probably like I don't know, a twist in it is Banksy is in love with Holden, and
Yeah.
their best friend have been together for years, which is again one of the saddest things in it, is that he loves this guy that he essentially can't be with. And even when he's offered to actually be with him, he still can't be with him because she walks away, and that's the deal breaker.
Yeah,
But
it's also one of those films.
I think it's pretty brave. I think at that time it must have been pretty brave that it did well at the cinema as well, and it got well received by critics and audience. I don't know how like Rotten Tomatoes is works out the audience score for old films. I have no idea.
I don't know.
Who knows? But people like it, which is pretty great. Like its themes.
It's one of those ones as well where like watching it with modern eyes, you sort of realize that ultimately it's all about these people who just can't express themselves like honestly, that they're always hiding something, and that's the frustrating part as a audience member, like as watching it. You kind of think like so much of this could be avoided if you were just open with somebody. You know, from Banksy to like Holden and Alyssa and stuff. They're all hiding something. And I wonder if, like modern day, you probably wouldn't hide any of those things. You'd be more open about it. And
no,
that's
kind of right in there.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's the thing that almost leaves you with more of a lull now, is that you sort of watch it thinking this is like it's really well written, but it's so avoidable. Like it's so you don't have to go down that route. But knowing it's the 90s and knowing that it was made in the 90s and stuff, you kind of have to look at it with those eyes, I think, to understand it a bit. But it's definitely a heavy one.
Yeah, it is a heavy one. All right, so that's I guess that's it for Chasing Amy in Depth. So short and sweet. Unlike the film, which was sad, and kind of depressing, but very good overall. So our next in depth is going to be Dogma, which we're both very excited to talk about. But for those who love our podcast so much, it's a double whammy day of our podcast, because we also have a pop culture episode coming out later today. We talk about multiple things. Nick went to the Star Wars celebration the other day. We talked about a few films. We talked about Super Mario Brothers film, Dungeons and Dragons, John Wick 4, and we talk a little bit about the Suicide Squad Kills a Justice League game, and we also mention something else. Nick, what else did we talk about? There was one more thing.
A little thing, which is our graphic novel, which is coming to Kickstarter.
Yes, we did. Jesus, that's not good, is it? I forgot that.
Easily done.
So that as well. So if you listen to this one bright and early, there's another one later out today. If you listen to this a bit later, then you might have already listened to the newest one. You might get confused on your timeline and be like, oh man, the latest one. You might miss this one, so don't. All right, great, fantastic. So thanks, Nick. If you those who want to find out more about us, we're on Twitter @ConsistentlyPod, Instagram @ConsistentlyPod. You can find us on YouTube by searching for Consistently OK Podcast, and just look for Consistently Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to find any of our older episodes, in depths, we've talked about Batman in depths before. We've talked about some Kevin Smith films already, Clerks and Morats, and many pop culture episodes covering a range of topics: wrestling, comics, Jeff Lemire. There's a bunch out there. Go and enjoy. All right, Nick, have a very good rest of the day.
I will. You too. And I will see you soon.
See you soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.